Good evening, guys. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing great. And how has been your day? If you can hear me, do let me know. So, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. This is class 15 of DSA software development course. And you're welcome once again. If you can hear me, do let me know in the comment section. Okay, I think I see someone saying that they can hear me. So good. All right. Okay, so today we'll be looking at understanding software requirements and user stories. I know, yes, we have talked about software requirement before in the first week of this course when we started with introduction to software development. But again, we'll be shining light on software requirement being one of the step that we consider in software processes. All right. Okay, so the class today, once again, is understanding software requirements and user stories. Understanding software requirements and user stories. And like I mentioned, we are not strangers to the topic, software requirements. We had, in our first week of this course, we had talked about this, maybe briefly, but yeah, today we'll be diving deeper into that. Okay. And for this class, understanding this class might actually be one of the things that will set you apart as a good software developer. It will be very impactful on your career journey as it has a lot to do with interacting with people and understanding their needs. So part of a software system that we tend not to talk about is actually the people. So beyond the code you're writing, beyond the databases, beyond UI, UX, beyond all of that, we actually have people being a part of the system. You may have deployed your code, fantastic project, but if people are not using it, that project is deemed to have failed, or if people don't understand it. And this seems to be a tricky part in the entire process of software development. Your product might be fantastic. The code you've written might actually be very great. But if you don't carry people along and they are not aware of the evolution of the software you're building, some tend to not want to adopt the software. I mean, I've seen many cases where a system is deployed to an organization and they just don't like the system. Why? Because people tend to not want to change, right? And when you introduce a change like that, they tend to fight it. So again, this part of the course might actually be one of the impactful things you have to learn, and will be one of the impactful things that will shape your career, because you get to learn how to interact with people, how to get on board with, or how to have stakeholders on board with what you're building, and how to be on board with what the stakeholder wants. And again, I've seen a lot of times where a stakeholder, in this case, the product owner, is saying this is what they want to build, and the software developer, in their own wisdom, goes ahead to build something else. And the stakeholder would see what has been built and would complain bitterly that this is not what they want. Even though what the software developer has built is like top notch and all, but if it's not meeting their need, adoption of such a system will be very hard. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if you have built and nobody is using it, what you have built is considered to have failed. And many a times we've seen projects where it's been said of such project that they were ahead of their time. And it's ahead of their time sometimes because the people you meant it for are not adopting it as you want it to be, right? So again, this class will actually expose you to how interacting with people can actually benefit you. All right, before we dive into the class, a bit of announcement. The LMS is live now and you should have received email invitation to join the course. You should look out for email from Canvas by instructor. I do know that some of you try to get onboarded and you went faced with some challenges, one or the other challenges. And I am aware also that the invitations were sent out again. So again, try and get onboarded as soon as possible. I think the invitation do expire. So the earlier you get onboarded, the better. And if you do have challenges, I know some of you are in some WhatsApp groups, your squads. So do forward any challenge to the admin of those WhatsApp group. All right. So being on that LMS is a requirement, it's not optional at all, because your assessments will be on that LMS. Files that are pertaining to the classes are being shared on the LMS as well. And their interaction and collaboration opportunity that you get to gain from being on the LMS. So in that vein, I also want to announce that your first modular assessment has been published and will close by Sunday, the 25th of May. So you have about 2 days now. Yeah, just shy of a day to attend to your first modular assessment. A lot of you have already done that, and kudos to you. And like I mentioned the last time, the LMS allows you to actually host discussion on it. So you have a lot of questions, I see them in the chat, but to get better engagement and for prompt response, I think you should try to adopt using the discussion feature in the LMS. And yeah, kudos to those who have been using it so far. I see a lot of questions on there, and I see that some of you are also responding to some of these questions, which is good. And I see some of you are even writing like a guide to help others. One of such guide was written by one of you to help with SSH login into GitHub, how to set up SSH and the likes. So kudos to you for doing that as well. So today we will explore what software requirements and user stories are, why they are essential, and how they fit into SDLC, which is software development life cycle. So the aim of this class is to help you see into the day-to-day activities you will engage in as a software developer. So again, I welcome you to class 15. And I'll do a quick rundown of what we will cover today and what the learning objectives are as well. So today we'll cover introduction to software requirements. We've touched on that a bit in the first week of this course, but we will go over that again just for a refresher. And we'll look at type of requirement, user stories, and then we'll consider a case study. We'll look at a link shortener project. So a link shortener project is like a bit.ly that you provide a link to, and it will give you a shorter version that you can always share. And that it makes it easier to actually share longer links, right? And also, in addition to the announcement, I did make an announcement on the LMS regarding this class for you to download a file It's part of the files on your dashboard. So if you go to week 5, if you go to classes, then you go to week 5, you see one of the file that I'm talking about. And also in the announcement, you can get to download the file from the announcement. But if you're watching this class sometime in the future and you still have access to your LMS, you can go to the files and download from there, because we'll be using that file as part of our case study for today's class. All right. So we had looked at introduction to software development in the first week. We also looked at software development life cycles and then software development methodologies such as Agile, Waterfall, and the likes. We did introduce you to all of that. So in software development lifecycle, we broke down the process to include requirement gathering, design, development, deployment, testing, and maintenance. So we looked at all of that. But our focus will be on requirement phase of the SDLC process. And this phase is quite an important one, right? And like I mentioned, it will actually dictate how your career will go, because you get to interact with people, right? But much more than that, it is important because it actually provides direction for the next phases to come after requirement gathering. So for example, if you don't have a specified requirement, it will be difficult to go to the next phase in the process, which is design. So it will be difficult to want to architect a software that you don't have a requirement for. And if you don't have requirements spelled out, you will have nothing to develop. And if you have nothing to develop, there is nothing to deploy or to test or to maintain. So not having a requirement spelled out might also translate to not having your software delivered on time. So during the class on software development lifecycle, your teacher did talk about the risk involved from a project management point of view. The risk involved if requirements are not clear or defined. It can cost the project in numerous ways. Economically, it can lead to software missing the time set for it to go live. And if you miss the time that has been set for a project to go live, you know, all other things could have been going on, such as marketing, and you've already marketed that this is the set day for your software to go live. But imagine if the requirements were not clear. That means there will be a delay. Or if the requirements were not clear, that means there will be an explosion of requirements down the line, because what was set originally wasn't clear. The owner might come back and say, oh, we want it this way, we want it that way. So explosion of requirement might creep into the project, whereby you're just dealing with requirement upon requirement or requirement changing, all because during the start of the project, nothing was really said concretely. So imagine your team is not clear on what to be built, and they go ahead and build anyway. The product owner or your clients, they usually have that tendency of coming back and again to ask for adjustments and say, oh, this is not what we meant, and all of that. And this also can become frustrating, especially when you know that the extra work could have been avoided if requirements were clear. All right. Okay, so now, like I was saying, what we'll cover today, we include introduction to software requirement, type of requirements, user stories, and then we'll cover a case study, which is a link shortener app. So what are the learning objectives? So by the end of this class, you should be able to define software requirements and explain their role in software development lifecycle, and differentiate between functional and non-functional requirements, and understand why both are critical to project success. And also write effective user stories using the INVEST framework, all right? And incorporate clear acceptance criteria. At the end of the day, we should be able to simulate a real-world requirement gathering session a rework requirement gathering session using a link shortener project, like I mentioned. We'll be using that as our case study. So we'll go from ideation to writing a product requirement, which is also called a PRD, a product requirement document. And then we translate that requirement document into practical project artifacts, such as user stories, acceptance criteria, right? Okay, so I will take a little pause and look at what you guys are talking about in the chat section. I can see comments flying up in the chat. So I will take a look to see if there are actually questions needing my attention. All right, a lot of good evenings. And again, I want to stress the fact that there is a discussion feature on the LMS that allows you to ask questions. I've seen a lot of questions on there that I've responded to myself. And if you feel like the chat section might be distracting, you can ignore it for now. But if you have any questions, do go to the discussion feature on the LMS to ask those questions. Okay. And if there are any challenges with taking the assessment, you should speak with the admin, okay? Or send an email to us on the LMS as well. All right, so no question. No question for now. Okay, so let's dive right into what we have today. So we start first with some definition. What are software requirements? So software requirements are the specification that define what a software system should do or be. They are the specification that define what a software system should be or do. And mind the word there, do or be. Those are quite important as we explore more what software requirements are. And by the time we start talking about user stories as well, you get to see the important role those two words play in writing up a software requirement. All right. So when it comes to software requirements, they detail out the system's functionalities, the features that will be contained in it, and the constraints that we are to bear in mind building a system. So in simple terms, it is the agreement between the people building the software and the people who need it. This agreement helps you know what to build, avoiding misunderstanding, staying focused on the right goals. And like I mentioned earlier, I've seen so many cases of software failing, all because this phase wasn't properly done. Like the product owner stated they want to build this, and the software developer heard something else or had a different understanding, and the headache that follows after because of this misunderstanding. So again, I want to stress that in your career as a software developer, you will deal with different kind of requirement. But again, I'm hoping that from today's class, you know how to handle how requirements are presented to you. Some people just by word of mouth state the requirements for their system, for the system they are looking to build. Some will come up with a document. Some will even work with you in breaking down the work that is required, like even highlight task that needs to be done. But all of this varies because people also vary due to background, vary due to knowledge, vary due to technical know-how. Some people are technical, and that technical knowledge that they have actually plays into how they write out requirement for what software they want to build. So imagine a software company that wants to contract out one of their projects. You can expect to have a well-written product requirement or project requirement because they have the technical know-how in building software. So that plays into how they present to you what requirement they want. But for someone who has not written software before, who has not used software at a scale before, you tend to see the lapses in their experience carry through in how they make requests for what they want to build. But you will come across all of these people, and it's not it's not a need for you to get frustrated or not want to work with some certain type of people. It's just for you to actually learn and build experience from working with such people. And you will get to learn some of the, well, I'll call it tricks, but some of these things actually come with experience. But I'll try to relay my own experience and also some of the knowledge that I've gathered over the time. And I'm hoping that those will help you. So in your career as a software developer, you deal with different kind of requirements, but they are broadly divided into functional and non-functional requirements, okay? Functional and non-functional requirements. And then there's a third one that I won't really class as a type, but it does come up again and again because you're building for people or you're building for a business. So there are business requirements that also comes along with this. There are times that you actually start with a business requirement before breaking things down into functional requirement or what is not functional. But at the end of it, there's a broader classification for requirement, which is really functional and non-functional. But again and again, like I said, because you're building to serve a business need most of the time, so you see requirement come in form of business requirement or requirement based on the domain you're working with. So if you're building a banking app, for instance, there are some business requirement that comes along the way. So say when a transfer happens, there should be some deductions that happens as well, right? Those are business requirements, right? Okay. So what are these types of function of requirements? I did mention functional requirements. What do they really mean? And we'll look at an example of each of these. So for a functional requirement, it describes what the system should do. You know, I mentioned earlier when we were defining software requirements that is a set of specification that define what a software system should do or be. So the part that specifies what the system should do is the functional part. So for example, someone might say the system should allow users log in with their credentials. So that's the functional part, right? What the system should do. And when we talk about a non-functional part, a non-functional requirement describes how the system should perform, right? How the system should perform. And an example would be that using the link shortener app that we also look at later as an example. So if you're building a link shortener app, some of the requirements, although not functional, would be that when a redirect is happening, it should really take a small amount of time to happen. So it's not like you type in the shortened link and you press enter and you have to wait and wait and wait before the redirect to the longer link happens, right? And another requirement might be that the system should respond within 2 seconds. So those are non-functional requirements, but they are requirements nonetheless. You may say that, oh, it really doesn't matter if a system should respond within 2 seconds, as long as it works. No, it's beyond that. It's beyond as long as it works, it works. You also want to cater for the peculiarity of the system you're building. So in this case now, when a user visits or uses your link shortener, they don't want to be waiting forever. So it may not even be stated as part of the business requirement, but you being a software developer and you caring for the needs of the user, you should know that a user should not wait for eternity just to have their shortened URL open up the page they intend to visit. So the next one is domain or business requirement. Like I described earlier, the requirement reflects the application domain or the business, right? And what does that mean? Using the example of let's even use the example of a link shortener again. So some of the requirement might be that a page user should be able to set custom links. So the way a link shortener would work by default is that you provide a long link and then it will shorten the link, but it will provide you with a random string, right? But if you pay extra amount of money, you may be able to change those random links. So a business requirement will state that only those who have paid a certain amount of money should be able to change the custom link as they desire. So those are business requirements. All right. You might be wondering, why should we care about all of this? I mean, beyond the fact that, why should we care about the types of requirement? Beyond the fact that we care about requirements, why should we care about the types? Why should you care that a requirement is functional or is non-functional, or a requirement is a business requirement or not? Okay? Why should you care? One of the reasons why you should care is that knowing the difference between functional and non-functional actually provides clarity. And if you have good clarity, you are able to build better products, right? Because now you know what is functional. And most of the time, what is functional is actually what is most important. So when you are building a system such as a link shortener, you should know that a functional requirement is that once I enter a long link, I should be provided with a shorter URL. That is functional, right? But non-functional would now be that, once I put in that link, it should auto-generate a random link. You have an option of either clicking a button before the short URL is generated, or once you paste the long URL, the short URL is auto-generated. So that doesn't impact the functionality of your app. The primary function is that you give it a long URL and you get a short URL. How it goes about that is the non-functional aspect of it. And like I gave an example earlier, that when you now eventually visit the short URL, it shouldn't take eternity to load. That it loads means that it functions, but how fast it does load is a non-functional requirement, right? So knowing the differences between these actually provides you with clarity. And like I said, better clarity leads to better product. So understanding the type of requirement helps everyone on the team. It helps the developers, it helps the project managers, it also helps the designer to know what work to prioritize. So you shouldn't prioritize a non-functional requirement over a functional requirement. It also helps you to ask the right questions. It helps you to avoid building the wrong thing, right? So if you treat a non-functional requirement like a functional one, you will miss performance, reliability, and user experience targets. Another advantage to learning the differences between this type of requirement is that it provides you with opportunity to have better conversation with the stakeholders. So when you as an engineer or you as a developer know what business requirements, like should we support 100,000 users, or know what is a security requirement, like should data be encrypted, or what a user goal is, like should we make onboarding easy for the users. I mean, all of this spark good conversation with your stakeholders. They can speak in terms that non-engineers understand. I mean, once you learn all this, you'll be able to speak in terms that non-engineers understand. You'll be able to speak with business people, and this will help you build trust and align expectation. And I want you to take your mind back to when I said that learning some of these things will actually impact your career in a positive way. I mean, I've come across quite a few developers. They are good at what they do, but they are terrible at communicating their thoughts over to the stakeholders involved in the project they are working on. They would want to explain a thing and they will find it really difficult, and they will have to resort to using technical jargons. And most of the time, the people you are talking to, they don't understand these things. Like you are saying, oh, this is how to do a map in TypeScript. This is how to select from a database, or you use a Redis server, or you use this or that, or you use AWS. Most of the times, the people you are talking to, they really don't care about that. All they want to know is that, oh, would we be able to have 100,000 users at the same time? Would they not steal our data? How easy will it be for people to sign in? Those are the things that they really care about. So another advantage will be knowing how to accurately estimate and how to plan accordingly. So functional tasks are easy to scope. For example, if you're told to build login form, it's just login form. At most, you have a field for email, you have a field for password, and then you have a button. But a non-functional ones like load testing, or guaranteeing that the app will be online for 100% of the time, or meeting a compliance need, or ensuring that you are complying to some policies, or I mean, all of these non-functional things, they get easily ignored sometimes. And when you ignore them, you tend to underestimate them. I mean, I've seen a place where, I've worked at a place where we needed to be compliant with some policies. And it took months to actually make our system compliant to those policies. And it's even a record time that we were able to do it in like few months. There are other companies that it will take them years to actually be compliant to these standards, right? But all of this, yes, they may seem like non-functional. Like if you don't have them, they won't stop your app from working. But not being aware of them can actually cause a delay to your project. So being aware of this different type of requirement, again, can actually help you in making good estimation for what you're building. So you know how to budget time properly, prepare for edge cases, and write more complete user stories. And another advantage is avoiding risk. So many failed projects weren't missing features, they were missing requirement clarity. And I've said that earlier too. So it's not like, oh, the feature is lacking, but it's just that what needed to be built wasn't stated clearly. So if you imagine shipping a product without considering security, without understanding that certain reports are legally required or regulatory requirements, not knowing that, okay, these audits needs to happen, or keeping track of such and such information is required by law, or knowing the business goal was to reduce support ticket, for instance, and not just to launch a chatbot. And I've seen such projects again and again. I mean, with the advent of LLMs, and everyone is just building chatbots without really stopping to ask themselves, why are we doing this? The people who are building right, they understood that, okay, if we could introduce a ChatGPT sort of chat box on their website, that they would not have to forward a lot of challenges that their users are having to the support team. But if you just go ahead and build a chatbot and not really understand why you have built it, or not really understand why your client is requesting for it, there's very high tendency that the business goal will not be met. And if the business goal is not met, again, that will be considered a product failure. Fine, the code runs fine, but the product itself has failed. And lastly, it sharpens your thinking. It forces the team to ask better questions. Such questions like, what does success look like? What would it look like when this product succeeds? What if 1,000 users use this app at the same time? I mean, think about DSA right now. I think there are about 100,000 students registered. So if you have to build a system for DSA, you have to ask yourself the question, what if the 100,000 students at the same time are using the system that I've built? What will happen, right? And such questions like, what if my users are from places that are quite remote, where their network is not 5G, where some of them are actually still using 2G? When you pull out your phone, what you see there is E sign, which is edge, not even 3G, not even LTE, not even 4G, right? So those are the things that come up when we consider this different type of requirement. Now let's talk about the granularity of requirements. How granular should the requirements be? I mean, it's really clear that we can't gather all requirements. I mean, the different type of software methodologies, such as waterfall and agile, all of them came about so that we can actually deliver software faster. What used to happen before now is you go through the requirement gathering phase. That might take a year. You do interviews with potential users. I mean, imagine spending a year just to figure out what the requirements are, as against what is provided now, where you can actually have an idea of a product to build, and in the next 3 months, you're already up with an MVP. An MVP is a minimum viable product. And what does that allow you? You can put in front of your users a product, and from their usage of that product, you gather real-time requirements, you gather feedback, and you can then iterate over your product with those feedback, as against waiting a whole year to even figure out the requirements, and then spending probably another year or months to do design, then spending a year to develop, and before you know it, you've been building for the last 4 years. Like, just imagine getting to the market with your product and nobody wants it. That means you spend 4 years or wasted 4 years just trying to build something that you think people need, as against spending a couple of months to get your app working and usable, and getting it in front of your users, and then getting their feedback to actually go back. So again, the point is, we cannot afford to wait till we get all requirements. So the level of detail required in software requirement can vary. It's crucial to actually be able to strike a balance between being too vague and overly detailed. Requirements should be clear, concise, and understandable. So you don't need to have like a 20-page requirement. Just go straight to the point of the things that you want the system to be able to do. And once you take that back to your stakeholder, I mean, it's also depending on the style you want to adopt in building the software. If your client wants it the waterfall model way, and you're okay with that, you have to work with them that way. But it's better to be able to mix and match the processes. I think we did talk about that in the first week when one of you asked the question if we can mix the methodologies. Yeah, in some cases you should be able to. Like, in some cases it's good to actually be able to gather some reasonable set of requirements to start with, not just one requirement like build login page. For instance, now the link shortener app that we're talking about, there's a project requirement document that states the basics that should be met. It sort of states the basics to build an MVP. So in the first phase of the project, you can actually do like a waterfall sort of methodology where you gather some sizable amount of requirements, and then you go into some initial design. For those who know how to do UX and UI UX people, you will have been in a situation where you are asked to do the wireframe for a product or build the first few pages of that product. So that's tending towards waterfall a bit. But again, the point is that the level of granularity of requirement should not be too deep to the point where you are not actually able to do quality work, that you're just stuck on the face of finding requirements or trying to meet all possible cases, trying to find all the edge cases that a product needs to cater to. So a balance between too vague and too detailed is such a balancing act that does come with experience. But at the least, the requirements should include expected outcomes that will be quantifiable, testable, and can be considered acceptable. We will talk about acceptance and what is testable and what quantifiable means later in the class. So to summarize all that we have talked about so far, a software requirement is like a contract between the idea and the implementation. So the person bringing the idea now will be the product owner, and the implementation will be you, the software developer. So it defines what the product should do, how it should behave, and why that matter to the user or business. If we get this part wrong, we could build something beautiful that no one actually needs. All right. So in the next part, we'll go into user stories. But before we do that, I'll open the floor for some questions and also look at the chat if there are any questions so far. All right, I'm looking at the question now. I don't think there are questions as such. Okay, someone is asking what's the difference between user story, functional requirement, and technical documentation. And for those talking about volume, I don't think there's any problem with the volume. It's pretty loud from the device I'm listening from. Okay, someone is asking what's the difference between. And the background noise, I actually don't get any background noise as well. Okay, so back to the question. What is the difference between user story, functional requirement, and technical documentation? So the technical documentation would actually highlight like the technical part of you implemented authentication, for instance, how people should be able to log into the system. I want other people to know how the implementation is done. I mean, there are different type of authentication method depending on the architecture of the system you're building. Some for APIs, some would go with using JWTs for authentication. So you have a token that is passed between the client and the server each time a request is being made. So imagine a documentation that speaks to how that is implemented to be your technical documentation. So for the functional requirement and how it differs from technical documentation, the functional requirement is asking or is stating what the system should do, right? So I, as a user, I should be able to put in my email and click a button to log in. So that is what the system should do. So, and how does that differ from a user story? I won't consider it to be like a comparison thing. A user story captures what the system should be like. So it's like a bite-size amount of requirement that is targeted to a particular part of the system. So you can write up a user story that says, I, as a user, when I log in, I should see a notification pop up that says, welcome. So that's a user story that is targeting a particular user. Or it could be that you're saying, I, as an admin, so let's use the LMS as an example now. I, as an admin, should be able to set up a quiz. So that's a really high-level user requirement, because what goes into building such a feature as a quiz is not just the form. I mean, you have to consider how the quizzes are marked, how the quizzes are graded, who can take the quiz, how long should the quiz run, and what should happen after the set time has elapsed, and what should happen when someone just clicks on the take quiz button and did not take an action. I mean, many other requirements that goes into that. But another example will be that I, as a student, should be able to see a quiz when a new quiz is published for the course I'm taking. So that would be a user requirement and a functional user requirement as such. But a non-functional user requirement would be that, okay, when I land on the quiz page, the quiz should load instantaneously, right? So that would be like a non-functional user requirement. Okay, so that's that about that. So I'm still looking out for more questions before we dive into. Okay, someone asked, what's the difference between business requirements and user requirements? Are they the same thing or not? So I'm guessing you're saying business requirement and user stories. So for business requirement, like I mentioned, when you are building a software, someone may have contracted that to you, or you are building it to actually meet a business goal. Fine, there are people that build software because they just like building stuff. But even for those people, what they are building is to serve a particular purpose, right? So we can class all of those purposes as being the business requirements. So the business that your client is into and the software they are building to meet their business needs. So those requirements that they will tell you that, okay, say for instance, you're building for an insurance company, right? And they tell you that, okay, we have different levels of insurance packages, and they pay different type of premiums based on the package they belong to. So why they are telling you all of that, they are already speaking to their business, right? They are already speaking to how they carry out business. Or you have a software where they are telling you that we have this different level of authorization that should happen. Like we have an admin, we have a CFO, we have a manager, and they are telling you what the manager should be able to do and what the manager shouldn't be able to do, right? All of those are business requirements. Okay. So that's that for business requirement. But when it comes to user story, like I did say, is a bite-size requirement that covers a specific feature, right? And the user story can be derived from a business requirement. Okay. So another question is, who provides each of the documents, a project manager or a product manager? So if you are in a product company, most of the time it will be provided for by a product manager. But if you in your company have a project manager, then the project requirements or users requirements will be provided for by the project manager. But the breaking down of a product or a project requirement, why you need to learn about it is for you to be aware. And again, there will be situations where you find yourself having to play the role of a product manager. I mean, imagine if you are a freelancer, for instance, this knowledge will actually be useful for you. And like I mentioned also, your career path, this sort of knowledge is the type that sets apart. Because the norm is that software developers, they don't know how to communicate technical stuff. But it gives you an edge if you know how to communicate this technical stuff that you as a software developer should know. Okay. So to answer your question, yeah, a product manager would do that if you have such in your team or in your company that you're working with. So Emmanuel is asking, should we treat the requirements with the same level of inquiry, or is anyone considered more important than the other? Yes. So requirements have different levels of importance, and we'll get to that part in the next phase of, in the next part of the class. Maybe I should just wait till that part. So someone is asking, what do I mean by user story? So again, a user story speaks to, okay, we are getting into user story in the next part, so let me just hold on for that question, right? Okay, great. I think those are the questions we have so far. So we go into user stories next, and we just introduce that before we take a break to take our attendance. So introduction to user stories. What are user stories? And this answers the last questions that I read out. User stories are short, simple descriptions of a feature told from the perspective of the end user. So they help to keep the focus on the user's needs and experiences. Okay? They help to keep the focus on the user's needs and experiences. All right, so I would like to give some example, but before we go to the example, let's look at what the structure of a typical user story looks like. So a user story will be like, as a type of user, I want some goal so that some reasons. So as a type of user, a user could be a customer, a user could be an admin, or the example that I gave earlier, a user could be a manager. I want to be able to achieve some goals so that this and this may happen. So example is, as a customer, I want to be able to track my order so that I know when it will arrive. So this is a user story. So it states what the user wants to do and why they need to do that. Or as an administrator, I want to be able to add new users to the system and manage their access. So two things that is made clear in that simple user story is that the person that is able to carry out this thing should be an admin, and the admin should be able to add new users, right? So the admin should have the ability to add a user. And after adding a user to the system, they should also be able to manage their assets, right? Okay, so that's like a simple example of a user story. Okay, so maybe I should pause a bit because we have just 2 minutes before 8 o'clock, before we go into how to write a user story. I see that a question popped up in the chat section, so I'll take a look at that. Oh, okay, not a question, just saying that their questions have been answered. All right, so in this part, we'll take a look at how a user story should happen. And like someone said in the chat that they are really, really enjoying this class. Yes, I myself, I enjoy the topic of user requirement and all, and because it actually plays a huge role in dictating the success of a project. And for a very long time, I never understood how people come up with this requirement. I mean, I really didn't understand it. But after a while, I began to get a grip on what requirements are, how they came to be, and how, I mean, yes, so in a nutshell, I do enjoy talking about user stories and all. And by the way, this class is just covering the basics, and like many of you are aware now, the expectation is that after these classes, you go ahead and do research on your own so that your understanding can be deepened. All right. I mean, no one is saying you shouldn't go and research. Please do research. So how do you write a user story? I'll just do a rundown and then we take a pause to take our attendance. The first thing to do when writing a user story is that you identify the user role. In the example that we gave previously, we said as an administrator. So an administrator is a user, or what we call a user persona. So when you're building a system, you have different kind of users. Some would be, let's say you are building an e-commerce site. You have a seller, you have a buyer, or you can call them a vendor and a buyer. You have an admin, you probably have a driver, you have all sort of users. So identifying the user and determine what the user wants to accomplish, and then thirdly, explain why the user wants to achieve that goal. All right, so we'll take a break now to attend to our attendance, and when we come back, we'll dive a little bit deeper into these things, and then to wrap the class up, we'll do a bit of user case, a case study, and then we'll be looking at the file that I mentioned in the beginning of the class that we should all download. It's on the LMS. I'll be sharing the file on the screen with you, but it will also be beneficial for you to also follow from your own end. So when we come back, we talk about user story more. We talk about acceptance criteria that I mentioned briefly earlier. We talk about guidelines for user stories or guidelines for projects generally while handling them. And there I will answer one of the questions about the hierarchies of requirements and if all requirements are the same. All right, so we'll join you after you've taken your attendance. All right, you guys are welcome back. I hope you were able to do your attendance. Okay, so we left off with user story, and I did mention that we'll get right back to user story once we come back. So, how do you write a user story? One, you identify the user role. We did give an example of a user story that states, as an administrator, I want to be able to add new users to the system and manage their access, right? So in that example, an administrator, okay, let me jump right back to where the example is. So in that example, an administrator is the user, and I want to be able to add new user is some goal they want to be able to achieve, and then to also manage their access. So that explains why they want to achieve the goal. So in writing a user story, these three should actually be carried through in your user story. Identifying the user, determining what the user wants to accomplish, and explaining why the user wants to achieve that goal. Okay, we will see some further guidelines to this in the course of the class, but I quickly want to explain another aspect of a user story, which is the acceptance criteria. Earlier, I did mention that while writing your user story, it should be one that is testable or deemed acceptable. So in writing a user story that is deemed acceptable, you should also write as part of the user story the acceptance criteria. What is acceptance criteria? It defines the condition that should be met. So when you write out a user story and you work on that particular task, the outcome of the work you have done should meet the acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria define the condition that a software product must satisfy to be accepted by a user, a customer, or other authorized entities or other stakeholders in the software. So they ensure everyone agrees on when a user story is complete. So I did explain earlier that requirements are like a contract between the product owner and the developer. So also is the user story. You can see it like a contract of deliverable between you, the developer, and a product owner, or between you and the product manager. So acceptance criteria states what should be in place in order to consider a work item, in this case, a user story done. And I also did mention earlier that part of the reason we learn about requirements and their type is to better understand what is to be built and avoid projects spiraling out of control. So if we don't have a user story stated or acceptance criteria stated, there's a high tendency that the project owner will keep coming back and saying that, oh, what you've built does not meet what we are asking for. There is that tendency because nothing was actually written down to serve like a contract between you, the developer, and the person that is making the request. So you must learn how to write user stories. Fine, in most companies, the user stories are typically written by a product owner. But what I've seen in practice is that product owners or project managers or product managers most of the times are not technical people, right? Yes, they know what the user wants. They know what they want to see in the product. But working on a product item or on a project item or writing up a user story sometimes goes beyond just the story. There are technicalities that needs to be considered sometimes. And really in the reality of things, right, there will be times that you as an engineer will actually have to write your own story because what you're building is not all the time user facing. So imagine now they say you should build that a user should be able to log in. And once they log in, they should be able to visit the dashboard. But in your project, you've not even coded any user interface at all. But you also need time to do that, right? You've not even picked what a database should look like. You've not even architected or designed how the login flow should happen. All of those are work that need to be done, right? Which means that you also have to write a user story. Yes, a technical user story. So there are such things as technical user story that engineering teams will typically write to do engineering work. It could also be that you're writing these stories for some technical debt that you have in your system. So technical debt will be something like, say your system is slowing down, but really not impacting users, but you as the developer is impacting your productivity. Or say you've coded a part of the system that is only God that understands it. Nobody else on your team understands it. So that would be a technical debt. And such technical debt will be satisfied by a refactor. So rewriting that portion of code. But those are work, right? That needs to be quantified as well. So what I'm saying in essence is that there are times that you have to write your story as a developer yourself, okay? All right, so that's that for acceptance criteria. So I mentioned earlier that there are frameworks, or you can call them guidelines, that you can follow in writing user stories beyond just knowing who the user is, beyond determining what they want to accomplish, and beyond explaining why the user wants to achieve that goal. There are frameworks that helps also. And here I will try to answer one of the questions that was asked earlier, that how do you prioritize requirements? Should they all be treated with the same level of inquiry? So we'll talk about that. So you can use any of these guidelines below to write up user stories, right, for your project. And it's not just about writing user stories. Some of these guidelines also guides you on how to prioritize what should be done first. Okay, so the first one here is invest, which is very good for writing good stories. So invest stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, testable. So when we say independent, it can be developed or tested separately as an entity in itself. When we say it should be negotiable, it means that the details of that story can be discussed and evolved. So it shouldn't be a work item that you can't really evolve the requirement or discuss into in more details what needs to be done. It should be valuable, so it should deliver business or user value, right? So I know I mentioned that there are times that you write technical stories. Those also are delivering values. Fine, it may not impact the business directly, and it may not even impact the users directly. But in this case, you as a developer is seen as a user, even though what you are using is like the code base, right? And even the business as a whole will get benefits down the line. Imagine there is a situation where the system fails, and where the issue is coming from is from a code that you wrote that you yourself know that you don't understand what is going on in this aspect of the system because it was a rush work, right? So if such a situation happens, it's going to take a longer time to actually resolve the issue because nobody really understands that part of the system. So it will be valuable if you actually do technical task of cleaning up the code, right? Even though it's indirectly valuable, but it is also still valuable. It should be estimable, so you should be able to size the effort that is needed to complete such a story. It should be small, so it's something you should be able to complete in a short period of time. Not that the user story you've written will take you 2 weeks to work on or take you an entire month. So if it's tending towards such, that has gone beyond what Invest would recommend that you should do. A user story should typically fall into a week of work at most. So you shouldn't spend more than a week on working on a typical user story. And if such case arises where you are working more than a week, then you should know that such a user story should have been broken down into smaller user stories. So it should be small, and then lastly, it should be testable. It should have clear pass or fail condition. So let's cite an example now. If the user story says build a login page that allows the user to enter their credentials, and when they click login, it takes them to the dashboard. Clearly stated in that user story are a couple of things. One, the user should be able to type in their credentials. Two, they should be able to click on a button. Three, clicking on that button should actually log them in. And four, they should end up on the dashboard. So if any of these four things fails, then we know that the story cannot be accepted because it has failed. But if all of this passes, then we know that, yes, the story is good to go. So it should be testable. Another guideline we can use is the 3 C's. And in the 3 C's, you write down a story on a piece of card. Then you have conversation around it. So you physically take it. I mean, now that we're working remote and all of that, you can have a version of that where you actually take the requirement and discuss it between developers, discuss it between products, product developers or product designers, and also discuss it with the users. And while doing all this discussion, you get to clarify ambiguity. And then lastly, the 3C will be confirmation, which allows you to define the acceptance criteria. What this actually helps you do is this. You have clarified all that the user needs. You in the process even have clarified some technical angle to the story that was not originally considered because you've spoken with developers, right? And many other things that you get to unravel in that process. And at the end of the day, you have a user story and you have a clearly stated acceptance criteria. So this type you can use when you are facilitating backlog grooming or story workshop. I'll quickly explain what those are. So in your backlog, also depending on the team you work with, when we do backlog grooming, you are creating loads and loads of stories. And why are we doing that? So that there will be a work item to work on for the developers or the people in the team. Or you can also have a story workshop. In a story workshop, it could be a 2 hours meeting, it could be a 4 hours meeting. You are looking at all the possible stories that can come up during a project. So let's say you receive a product or a project requirement document. You know, earlier I was saying that there will be times that it might seem that what we are doing feels like waterfall. Waterfall is not entirely bad in itself, just that it doesn't fit for every type of project. If the requirements are clear, like you just want to build a landing page that does this, this, and that, you can get all the requirement once, do the design once, and do development once, and not have to iterate. But if you're building a product where you know that the business changes based on the market, and once the business changes, the feature requirement changes, such you cannot build with waterfall. Okay, so in essence, you can actually have a workshop that deals with all the user stories that are needed beforehand. And this type of card conversation confirmation style really works for such. And when it comes to picking what you should work on, this answers the question that was asked earlier. How do you prioritize? You can use the Moscow method. So Moscow method says M is standing for must have, should have, could have or won't have at this time, right? So you can use that to actually prioritize what should be done. So fine, all requirements are requirements, but not all requirements have their priority. It's not the same level of inquiry as the question stated that we give to all of them. So we can use this method to actually unravel what should be done first. So you deal with the must-have. So what should we have in this system? There are systems that you don't even need authentication first, right? You can allow just about anybody to use the tool. So a must-have in that case is not a login page, because really you don't need authentication or authorization to use the tool. It could be a should have. So let's say, for instance, the link shortener app that we're building. A must-have is that I should be able to enter a long URL and get a shortened URL. So that's a must-have, which means anything that we get worked on first should be around having that link shortening actually happen. A should have will now be that, oh, we want the users to be able to log in so that they will have access to a dashboard where they can manage all the links they have ever shortened, right? A could have will be that, oh, I want to be able to customize the URL that I'm shortening. It won't have at this time might be that, oh, I want to be able to delete the links that I have created. And you might call it a won't have because it really doesn't impact the primary purpose of the app, which is really to shorten apps and shorten links, right? So you can use all of that to prioritize your user stories or the requirement that you've been given. I'll just gloss through the remaining, which is smart, deep. I'm quite sure that some of you or most of us here are familiar with SMART. You use SMART in setting goals. So if you have ever set goals before or have ever learned about goal setting, you must have come across SMART. So SMART says that you should be specific, that the user story you're writing should be measurable, should be achievable, should be relevant to the business, and should be time-bound. So it shouldn't go on for eternity. And deep also is a framework you can use in managing backlog. I did describe earlier what a backlog is, right? That a backlog is a list of items that need to be completed. They are organized and prioritized to achieve a product or project goal. So you generate a backlog from such a thing like a story workshop, right? When I was describing 3Cs earlier, I did mention story workshop or backlog grooming. So when you do that, you generate stories. So you can use deep. Deep stands for detailed, appropriately estimated, emergent, and prioritized. So the slide you see on your screen right now talks about where you can use these different frameworks. So when you want to write clear user stories, use invest or the 3Cs. When you're managing a story backlog, you use deep. When you're aligning to product goals, you use smart. So if you're speaking with people in product, a product manager or a product owner, most of the time they don't know the technicalities involved in writing up the code, but they can tell you what their goals are. So while they are talking about their goals, you as a product developer or a team lead who is sitting in on that meeting should be able to guide that conversation using this SMART. So it should be specific, it should be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So it's not like you'll be speaking with product and they are selling to you some extravagant features that it will take you years on years to even build. They want the feature to be able to read your mood, to be able to know when you're hungry. Whereas you know that those things are actually very difficult to achieve or close to unachievable or or plainly just not useful for what is being built. So you should be able to guide such conversations. So when you want to prioritize stories, like I mentioned earlier, you can use Moscow, and that answers one of the questions that was raised earlier. Okay, so I want us to do a little bit of workshop session, but before we do that, I will show you on my screen later in the class how to create, or we'll just work with the project requirement document that we have to create stories from it. So you can actually open to that. But before we do that, I want to talk briefly about Kanban boards. Kanban boards. So all of this that we're talking about, you can actually implement it in such a way that it's visible for everyone to see. So a Kanban board can be a valuable tool for managing requirements and user stories. So now you've written the user story. You know, I said something about backlog grooming. So you can actually start, or you can section them into like stories that are still in the backlog or stories that are in to do. So you can either call it backlog or to do, and you can move stories along the way. So you pick one and then you move it to in progress. Then once you're done, you move it to done. Different teams also have different approaches that they use. So right now I want to share my screen to show you an example of what I'm talking about. So in the example that I want to show you, that you're seeing on your screen right now, we have a backlog section, and all of this section you get to fill with stories that you generate from your backlog grooming session, right? And then you have a to-do. So you can actually put all of this together. But like I said, depending on your team. So if you have several people on your team, you can move a story from backlog to to-do. So when you move it to to-do, you are saying that, okay, you as a person want to work on this. So although we are not using this tool right now, but just to explain how all of this goes. So I can say that I, as a developer, wants to work on this work item, and then I move it to my own to-do, right? So this is on my own to-do list. And once I want to start, I move it from that to-do to in progress. And once the code is done, let's use this for an example. You see here now, the user story says on the cart page, when I land on the cart page, I should see an empty cart unless I have added item to the cart. Currently, the template has an initial static data. Remove the static data. I should be able to interact with the items in the cart. I should be able to check out from the cart. So this is a story, although it doesn't have acceptance criteria, but it's something you should form as an habit, that every story that you work on actually has an acceptance criteria. And it does not have an acceptance criteria because I'm the one making the request. So it's not like I'm writing it for someone else to work on. And you see here that there's an attached pull request. If you remember from your last class when we talked about Git. So this tool actually integrates with GitHub, and you can write a piece of code and attach that code to that work item. So what this allows is that you and your team members can actually see the work done, can see the piece of code that has been written, and they can also look at the code. There's such a thing called code review. So they review the code before you merge it into the main code. You know, your instructor talked about branching off the main branch. So you create a branch of the main branch, write the code that you want to write. After review has been done and all test passes, you merge it back into the main code base. So you can see from the this Kanban board. Okay, so this is what we call a Kanban board actually, and we have different tools that you can use to manage your stories. So this one right here that I'm showing you is called Shortcut. It's called Shortcut. There are other ones like Trello. There's another one called Swim Lanes. There's Monday. There's Asana. There's Jira. There's ClickUp. I think Jira is quite popular. Asana also is quite popular, and Trello is popular as well. I've been using Trello for as long as I can remember. I'm very sure by the time I show you my Trello, which is just right here. So I want us to actually create some stories here. So the first tool, this tool that I'm showing you right here, is Shortcut. This second one is Trello, but they have the same functionalities. I just want to show you on Trello how to create, but let's just continue with the description I'm giving you with Shortcut. So I was saying that once you're done writing the code and you create a PR, so now this work item or this story haven't been written up, has a PR attached to it already. You can see it's already merged. So once it's merged, means that the work is done. So it should move from review to done. And some of these tools actually have automation in that when it sees that a work is done, it just automatically moves it over to done. You can see all the work that was done on this project. You can see when it was done. It was done like some 2 years ago, December 2023. All right. So that's that about the Kanban board. So whatever the software development methodology that you're using, it could be waterfall. Waterfall also benefits from using a Kanban board. It could be that you're doing agile. It also benefits from using a Kanban board. In this case, the team is actually agile. Agile in the sense that we have sprints. Scrolling downwards here, you see some epic, says our first epic, and so on and so forth. All right. And if you're doing lane as well, you get to use a Kanban board to organize your stories and provide visibility for everyone that is working on the team with you. Okay, so let us switch back to our slide. And then we will do a case study. All right. So we'll look at a case study for link shortener app, right? Okay. So a case study here, we are going to consider a project for shortening a URL. So it's a project that should be done for the web into short shareable links. It enables link tracking. It has expiration and basic analytics. And it targets users, general public, marketers, startup teams, and so on and so forth. So we look at some key user stories. In this case, I believe we all have our project requirement document open now. And all of this that you're seeing on the slide is extracted from that. The project document goes into more details of what we are talking about here. So a key user story will be shorting a link, right? So a user enters a URL and receives a short link. Track clicks, because part of the requirement for the project is that we should be able to track the link. And what do we mean by track link? So what number of people visit the link, right? and the last time the link was clicked. So we want to be able to keep track of all of that. So that could be a user story. And the third user story there could be that we want to track link expiration or be able to set when the link should expire in such a way that after a set period of time, nobody should be able to access the link again. So let us also look at a sample acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria could be that given a valid URL, the system returns a unique short link. So that acceptance criteria will be for the first one, which is to shorten a link. Then the second will be that when you click on a short link, it should redirect you to a long URL, right? And the last one being that user should be able to set expiry date, and link is disabled after expiration. So let's look at some non-functional requirement for this particular system or for this particular app. Non-functional requirement would be that redirect should happen in less than 300 milliseconds. So when I paste that shortened link into my browser and I click enter, I should see the long URL in less than 300 milliseconds. So it's different from saying that the long URL should load in 300 milliseconds. It's saying that when I paste the short link, I should see the long version of the URL in less than 300 milliseconds. And then security, link should be safe. So every link should be validated. It shouldn't be that someone is entering a link that will lead you to where they will collect your data, right? And use it to farm the sensitive information from you. Then we should look at scalability. So imagine a system where 10,000 people are using it every day. It won't be a matter of just having a database, having an API call, or having a front end somewhere. Actually, I think by next week when we start talking about front end development, or by the time we get to full stack development, I would like to share with you a sample code of this link shortening app. And in the sample code, I actually coded in such a way that it can actually take hundreds of thousands of requests per time. You see the system broken down into different aspects. You see a redirector that handles when you type in a short link. So it's the one that takes care of going to the right link. You see a dashboard for the user to be able to manage all the links that they have. And then there's a database. Then there's an API that coordinates right into the database, and so on and so forth, right? But we'll get to that when we get to it. So talking about the tech stack is also not a non-functional requirement for the project. So the tech stack might state that you use Node.js, you use React, or you use Postgres SQL or TRPC. So those will be non-functional requirement of the system. All right, I would like us to ask some questions, or I attend to some of our questions before we actually go into doing some practice. Also, by a way of announcing to us, we've started talking about product requirement or project requirement document. And we also know that we've done our first month of this course. We are actually in the second month of the course. Very soon, you will all be receiving your project requirement document, which we describe the project that you all have to work on as part of completing this course. So at a point in the course, you all have to start working on the project that you submit, that we mark the completion of this course for you. But anyway, information about that will come much later, but do bear in mind that it's coming, and the things that we cover tonight will be useful for you as you break those down into codes or into a software that you can deliver. All right, so I'll take some of your questions now. All right. Okay, still going through your chat to see if there are questions. There's a question that I don't quite get. A week for the user stories that will include this framework. Maybe you try and re-ask the question. So a question says here that, is the user story necessary before the PRD is developed, like in ideation or during PRD development? So if I get this question right, the PRD should come first. So you break down the PRD into stories, actually. Although the document that I supplied to you also contained user stories, you have it there just so to help you see how stories, how a project requirement is broken down into story. A typical project requirement wouldn't contain user story as such. It will be up to you and the product manager to actually come up with the story. In backlog grooming or story grooming, like I mentioned earlier, it's not just a thing that the product owners alone do. They have to do it in collaboration with software developers. Someone asked if we can mix up all the frameworks for user story. So I won't particularly say mix them all up for your user story, but you can learn from each of the frameworks. But I think it's better to just stick with one. And the reason for that is you can easily communicate the framework you're using to another person. So let's say you have a team of 10 people. You as a team can all agree that this is the framework we use for writing up our story. So it's easier that way. So I would advise that you stick with one, but having an understanding of all of them isn't bad at all. Okay, I think I already answered the other question. Yes, so Kanban board is a project management tool. So yes, in actual fact, you can consider this part that we're talking about to be the project management aspect of software development. Yes, you may not be a project manager through and through, but it benefits you to know because you're actually working as part of a team. Okay. All right. Any more questions before we go right straight into the workshop session? So here I'll be sharing my screen. Like I showed you earlier, I showed you Trello that will create some stories from our products requirement document. I mean, you already have the stories in the product requirement document. It's just a matter of seeing how it's done, okay? So going to the product requirement document, I'll just read some few things. It speaks to, there's an overview. There's an overview that states that the link shortener is a web application that allows users to generate short shareable URLs from long links. It aims to simplify link sharing, track usage analytics, and so on and so forth, just like I mentioned. And it states the goal and objectives, right? And all of this provides context for you, the developer, and it speaks to the target users. And from here, you can begin to see some of the things, right, that should go into building the product. After talking about the target users, then go right straight into the user stories and the features. So a core user story is to shorten a link. All right, so I think at this point now, we should just jump right into Trello and replicate what we had with shortcut. Okay, so here, like I mentioned, that we can groom our backlog. So you can consider all of these that we have in the product development, product requirement document, or the project requirement document, to be a pre-groomed user story. So what we do now is just create a list, and we'll call it a backlog, and then create another one that will be to do, and then create another one to be in progress, and in review, and then done. So we have all of that. So to add a story, you just click on add card. So I will just copy paste to make this a little bit faster. So we have the user story itself in here. Okay. Now we can further edit this by opening a card. So let's change the name of this. We'll put this inside the description of the card. So we'll just cut this out and call it shorten a link. So this will be the user story, shorten the link, and inside the description we have this, and then we can have an acceptance criteria. In it as well. So we'll just give this a heading too, like user story. I mean, this is like a short version of this. There might be other system that goes quite elaborate, much more elaborate than this, but this is like a simplified version of writing up a story. So I'll just copy over the acceptance criteria from here, from the product requirement document, and paste right here. Let's clean that up. And you do this for all the stories in there. So acceptance criteria is user can paste a URL, system returns a unique short link redirects to the original URL. Then you save. So you've created a story and is in a backlog. So let's say now, let's assume that all the stories that we have in that product requirement document, we've already created here. So you as a developer now, you can now start moving across stories. So here you have it in your to-do. And the good thing also is that if you're working with a designer, whilst you're in the process of grooming backlog, sometimes also depending on the team, but as part of grooming a backlog, a designer will have gone ahead to do a design for what the page should look like, right? So by the time you as a developer, you are picking up that story, you already have a design in it. And then you move it to your to-do, and Once you are ready to start working on it, it moves to progress. And then once you're done working on it, just like I showed us earlier, you move it to short link or to move it to in review. And then once all of that is done, you move it to done. So typically what happens between review and done is that the code that you've written will now be merged. Let me skip over to what I showed us earlier. That when you have something in progress, you know this was right here in review. That when it's in review, you do code review and ensure that what you've written is actually correct. And the other things that happen is you can deploy the code you've written into a test server so that a QA, a quality assurance person, or a tester, you might have heard of testers before, being a member of the software development team. So testers, product owners will check to see that the criteria, the acceptance criteria is actually met. So if all of that is met, what will typically happen is that you can mark it as done. So depending on the tool you are using, actually, you can have a check mark in it that certifies that it is done. So once that is done, the code is now merged with what is in production. So once it's moved over to done, by the time you go to visit the link where the project is hosted, you should now be seeing the feature already being part of the project. So all of that too you can replicate here. And I think in subsequent classes or in subsequent sessions that we have, or probably we do it on the LMS, we provide some guidelines as well, some practical guidelines on how to implement all of this. But I really like what Shortcut does. I think it's really built specifically for product development, unlike Trello that tries to cater to the need of many use cases, right? So let's take a look at some other stories that can come up as part of this project that we are looking at. Okay, so another story might be to track clicks, like I mentioned. Another story will be to view link history. So this will require a logged in user so that you can see all the links that you've ever created on the platform. You can also set link expiration, create custom short codes. So you can have a link such as bit.ly/dsasd-ds, like we had in the last class, and so on and so forth. And I did talk about the non-functional requirement also while explaining the case study. So I do believe that with all of this that we've covered today, at least if you were not aware of such a thing as stories or user stories, now you're much aware. And I do hope that this also helps you in your journey as a software developer. So to do a quick recap, what we looked at today, we looked at Kanban boards. We considered a case study to better explain user stories and how you translate product or project requirement documents into user stories. We talked about guidelines for user stories, or you can call them frameworks for user stories. And we also talked about acceptance criteria. We talked about what should constitute a good user story, that it should be that a user, you should identify who the user is, determine what they want to do, and explain why they want to do that in which they are trying to do. And then before all of that, we had talked about requirements. We talked about the granularity of requirements. How granular should your requirement be? Should it be vague? Should it be too explicit? And we did mention that we should find a good balance between too vague and too explicit, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you state a requirement and nobody understands what you're trying to achieve, or find yourself in a state where you are trying to be too specific that it now takes too much time to come up with a requirement. All right, so requirements should have good clarity, right? In such a way that a developer can see it and know what is needed. And we did talk about why we should understand the different type of requirement. It helps us to build better product because we now have better clarity. It helps us to have better conversation with stakeholders, right? It helps us to be accurate with what we are building, help us to be accurate with what we are also estimating as work plan, and so on and so forth, right? And then we talked about how it facilitates reasoning better, because now you understand the different part of the project you're building. All right, so now we've come to the end of the class. I will just take a peep at the chart to see if there are any questions that needs my attention. Okay, someone is still asking for material for the class. I do believe that by now we should know that all of these are available on the LMS, and you can go there to check. And if it's not there, just hold on a bit. They will all be uploaded. I mean, the class has not ended. The idea is that you attend the class, you listen in the class, and when you need to do a review, you can go to the LMS to look for the file. But we are still in the class, so it will be uploaded right after the class, or just check a couple of hours after the class, you will see it. All right, so someone asked what tool we are using. So right now, I showed you two tools. One was a shortcut, and the one we created user stories on was Trello. Okay, and both have Kanban boards. So those set of cards that you see there, they are constituted on a Kanban board. I know Kanban board come from a different concept entirely, but that's the industry standard for describing that type of stack of card and the different sections that you have it in. All right, you don't need to install Trello. You just go to trello.com and you sign up there. So if you check the announcement that was placed on the LMS, you'll see what is required for you to be on Trello. All right, thank you for responding to that, Emmanuel Olusegun. All right. So the link that I said I would drop, I'm not sure I said I would drop a link though, but there is a link to the product requirement document is in the announcement on your LMS. All right. Okay, so that's that about that. So I mentioned that I have a project on this link shortener, and I do hope that I'll be able to share with you in the next couple of weeks, just for you to see how to implement such. I mean, just for you to play around with anyway. So thank you for joining the class today. And once again, we're happy to have you. And I do hope that this class has helped to increase your knowledge and boost your confidence as you are learning to become a software developer. So good night to you all, and good day wherever you're joining from, if it's not night where you are. And we'll see you in the next class. So in the next class, we will be looking at introduction to front-end development. I know some of you have been really looking forward to writing React code, writing Vue, writing Vue. So next week, we'll be doing that. Okay, see you then, and have a wonderful night rest.